Hello. So the first video was a short introduction to close reading. And just to recap, a close reading, simply put, is a patient and careful interpretation of a text or part of a text. It isn't about assessing what critics have already said about the text. Rather, it's about building up your own understanding and analysis of the text, assuming that every little detail is potentially important. There's no magic formula to follow. Close reading is really something that you just learn by practicing. It's a kind of detective work that takes time and patience to question and to ponder all the different parts of the poem and figure out how they fit together. And when you have a really good understanding of the text, then you can pick out the most interesting features and write an analysis to share your insights with others. So we're going to look at poem Lana Turner Has Collapsed by Frank OHara. I think this might turn into one video, maybe two. Frank OHara, born 1926, died young 1966. And he is, I think, a very funny and kind of delicious poet. One of the most famous poets of the loose literary and artistic movement, the New York School. He was a queer poet, and he was very much embedded in the art scene in New York, where he also worked as a curator at the Museum of Modern Art. I like to hear poets read, and unfortunately I couldn't find him reading this particular poem, but we can listen to him reading a different poem.
The poem's called Having a Coke with You. It's even more fun than going to San Sebastian, Irun, Onday, Biarritz, Bayonne, or being sick to my stomach on the Travesera de Gracia in Barcelona. Partly because in your orange shirt you look like a better, happier St. Sebastian. Partly because of my love for you. Partly because of your love for yogurt. Partly because of the fluorescent orange tulips around the birches. Partly because of the secrecy our smiles take on before people and statuary. It is hard to believe when I'm with you that there can be anything as still, as solemn, as unpleasantly definitive as statuary, when right in front of it, in the warm New York 4 o'clock light. We are drifting back and forth between each other like a tree breathing through its spectacles. And the portrait show seems to have no faces in it at all, just paint. You suddenly wonder why in the world anyone ever did them. I look at you, and I would rather look at you than all the portraits in the world except possibly for the Polish rider occasionally, and anyway it's in the Frick, which thank heavens you haven't gone to yet so we can go together the first time. And the fact that you move so beautifully more or less takes care of futurism, just as at home I never think of the nude descending a staircase or at a rehearsal a single drawing of Leonardo or Michelangelo that used to wow me. And what good does all the research of the Impressionists do them when they never got the right person to stand near the tree when the sun sank? Or for that matter, Marino Marini when he didn't pick the rider as carefully as the horse. It seems they were all cheated of some marvelous experience, which is not going to go wasted on me, which is why I'm telling you about it.
So in a moment, I will show you the poem that we're mostly going to look at in this video. And if you'd like, you can pause the video and spend some time thinking about it, reading the poem, thinking what kind of situation does this conjure up? What don't I understand yet? What kinds of things maybe are there that I do understand but just kind of seem pointless, like so what? And coming up with some questions about it. Just before we do that, these are two paintings that are mentioned in that previous poem that we just heard, Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase and Rembrandt's Polish Rider. That's the one where he's like, I would rather look at you than any portrait in the world, apart maybe occasionally sometimes from this one. I think it's a funny picture to have chosen. Okay, so if you like, you can think about this poem for a little bit. So, what are the questions that you have? Who is in this poem? There is an I in this poem, someone who is speaking, and apparently it's the same voice throughout. For convenience, I'm going to call this someone the speaker, although if you wanted to call them the narrator or the poet or the persona or maybe even the protagonist, I think that's fine. And I'm going to use the pronoun he, but you'd be within your rights to use the gender neutral they. There's also a you in this poem, an addressee or maybe addressees. We don't yet know if it's singular or plural you. And hello, Lana Turner is in this poem. One obvious question might be who's Lana Turner, and that's easy. She's a movie star. Here's a picture of her. So what's going on? The speaker is recounting how he was on his way to meet the addressee when he noticed this headline: Lana Turner has collapsed. So I'll just quickly read through the poem once. Lana Turner has collapsed. I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head hard. So it was really snowing and raining and I was in such a hurry to meet you, but the traffic was acting exactly like the sky. And suddenly I see a headline, Lana Turner has collapsed. There is no snow in Hollywood. There is no rain in California. I have been to lots of parties and acted perfectly disgraceful, but I never actually collapsed. Oh, Lana Turner, we love you. Get up. So we don't know how serious this is, and it's a tabloid celeb gossip kind of situation, so we really don't know if it's even true. Maybe Lana slipped and fell. Maybe Lana Turner sat down suddenly. The whole thing is blown out of proportion. It's an ambiguous headline, maybe a deliberately ambiguous one, kind of like a pre-internet clickbait. So about half, maybe 2/3 of the poem seems to be about Lana Turner, and the rest is just about the weather. So now what? Maybe we're done. But let's see what happens if we keep thinking, keep reading, keep looking for things that stick out, things that maybe don't make sense yet, that feel like they might have some kind of sense that they haven't yet revealed, and things that prompt us to devise questions that feel promising. So let's start with form. It's free verse, no rhyme scheme. The metrical stresses, the kind of beats of the poem are not particularly regular or patterned. The syllable count per line is quite varied. You could scan it if you wanted, marking down which syllables you think are stressed or unstressed. What do you notice about punctuation? You notice that it isn't there. Okay, actually, there are 2 punctuation marks, both of them exclamation marks. Potentially, they could be quoted punctuation marks. They could be part of the headline itself. So what effect do we think this lack of punctuation has? The poem is so kind of artfully organized syntactically and through its line breaks that I never really miss the punctuation. I'm not kind of baffled about which words are fulfilling which grammatical functions. The effect of the lack of punctuation, I think, is breathlessness, like a kind of blurting, a babbling, yet it's oddly poised, patterned, balanced. It is a strangely kind of felicitous and graceful blurting, an elegant splurge. Sometimes close reading is about noticing what's missing, like the punctuation. So what other lacuna are there? What other omissions, gaps, things that could have been there but aren't there? Well, of course, it's hard to spot things that aren't there. About Lana's collapse, I'm intrigued by how little the speaker actually tells us. If he cares so much, why didn't he, upon seeing that headline, rush over to the newspaper vendor and press a couple of dimes in their hand and, snap out that newspaper and avidly read the article and find out what this is all about. Why didn't he do that? Any ideas? Maybe it's like his version of The Sun or something. It's a paper that he never buys on principle. Maybe he's too poor to buy this newspaper, or too busy, or too upset or scared to find out what's actually happened. Or maybe he's not as interested in Lana Turner as he's making out to be. So some interesting possibilities there. Okay. This poem is and is not about Lana Turner, and we're starting to build up some useful speculations about the speaker's tone. Maybe there's a kind of rushed theatrical flamboyance here. Okay, who is he meeting? Is there any textual evidence for this? Is it maybe a friend, an acquaintance, a lover, another poet? Maybe the person he's meeting has some special relationship with Lana Turner? On balance, I don't think so. I think you could maybe explore this poem as an expression of like highly fraught alarm from one Lana Turner stan to another. But my hunch is that this isn't a poem that centers Lana Turner or even her fans. My hunch is that Lana Turner is being invoked by the speaker here, partly, if not wholly, as a kind of distraction. So a distraction from what? I'm not sure yet. So let's hold on to that hunch. The addressee's identity, I think, is pretty ambiguous. In this early stage of the poem, in this early stage of the close reading, you might want to think about what sticks out. And for me, this word trotting really sticks out. While Lana is or maybe is not collapsing, the speaker is or is not trotting. So here's another potentially profound question. Why does the speaker trot specifically? It's a tough question. So here's another one. What else trots? Fancy little dogs, fancy little yappy dogs with pom-pom tails trot. Horses trot. If you were to describe a human as trotting, what kind of tone and mood are you creating there? Your answer to that question might shape your later reading of this poem. I think of trotting along as a way of describing one's own movement is a kind of slightly self-deprecatory, disarming way of talking about oneself. If you were to tell someone else to trot along, it might be kind of a little bit mocking and rude, or perhaps condescendingly affectionate. So to talk about that way about yourself is perhaps edging on kind of self-mockery. Trotting is also something of a technical term when it's applied to horses. So a trot is a kind of middle state between a walk, a walking gait, and a canter or gallop. A trot is a phase is a gait with two kind of phases to it, two beats to it, allowing the horse to travel faster than a walk, but not as fast as a canter or gallop. So I think someone who is trotting is moving maybe swiftly, by analogy, but not that swiftly. I think this would be a very different poem if the speaker was walking or strolling or ambling or pacing or galloping. Much of this poem is about the weather, a boring topic by default. Sometimes you need a boring topic. I think the poem would probably repay an eco-critical reading. You could draw on theorists like Donna Haraway, Anna Tsing, Timothy Morton, and on themes like entanglement, the more than human, transcorporeality, the agency of the non-human world. But this is a close reading, so let's not get too distracted from the words on the page. You might notice here a bit of alliteration. The repeated H, hailing, hits you on the head hard. So what's the effect of that? Well, you might feel there's a kind of insistent splattering and beating down of precipitation, a kind of form performing content moment, that kind of onomatopoeic quality where the sound imitates or echoes the sense. I'm not really that sure that the huffy h sound that linguists would call a voiceless glottal fricative, I'm not sure that sound suggests hail, snow, or rain. I do think that the fairly dense flurry of H's sort of ties that little segment together, almost as though it's surrounded in invisible parentheses in this largely punctuation-free poem, a kind of little digression, an aside, as though it's unimportant. Is it really unimportant? There's also a construction here that you might loosely call a kind of anti-metaboly, albeit split by this little bit that we've already mentioned. It's raining and snowing, and the next time it's snowing and raining. The order has swapped around. The line break breaks up the phrase as well in the second iteration. So in a close reading, technical terms like these, they can be useful for making precise and succinct descriptions, and they can help you be alert to techniques and features that are going to recur across many different poems. But there are also just like cajillions of terms like this out there. So please don't feel like you have to kind of learn what they all mean. Maybe we can talk through a few useful ones in a later video. Maybe what's more important is how would you describe the effect of repeating that same phrase, only reversed, and then slightly disrupted by the line break? What difference would it make if it was raining and snowing in that order both times? I was trotting along and suddenly it started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing, but hailing hits you on the head hard, so it was really raining and snowing. And what difference would it make if the line read, so really it was snowing and raining, not so it was really snowing and raining? Hailing hits you on the head hard, so really it was snowing and raining. Well, I'm not sure. But what we do have is this kind of hopeful, haphazard harried OHara hurrying along to some rendezvous, through the rain and through the snow, or perhaps through the hail. So let's search for more questions. Maybe search for more significant omissions. It started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing. And here is another question, and this one feels good. It started raining and snowing, and you said it was hailing. It was really snowing and raining. This question might even be the most important question, I think. Why doesn't he call it sleet? So a fairly large fragment of this brief poem is devoted to how do you refer to this weather phenomenon? And this bit kind of drags a little bit. It's a little bit tedious. You're kind of waiting for the poem to get started. There's some kind of argument or uncertainty or controversy about how you're going to name this form of water that's been falling out of the sky. And it sounds to me like sleet. In most British English, sleet is slushy, partly frozen rain or partly melted snow or hail. And more significantly, in US English, sleet usually means ice pellets, very small hailstones, exactly the kind that don't really hit you on the head hard. So why not? You said it was hailing, but it was really sleeting. So one hypothesis, the poem speaker doesn't know the word sleet. Frank OHara knows it, and he's used it in other poems. He can refer to sleet. So what is your game, OHara? Well, maybe the speaker doesn't know it, or maybe they don't want to use it. So why do we talk about the weather? And how do we talk about the weather? Weather talk is, of course, classic chat, small talk. It's like uncontroversial pleasantries that you can share with a stranger. It might also be the initial babble with a friend as you've just kind of recently bumped into each other or reunited, particularly if you're a little bit nervous or distracted or sort of excited to see them. Ways of talking about the weather are, of course, variable across time and across different cultures. But I do think that it's that kind of sociable chattiness that is being invoked in this poem. Weather is also invested with emotion, feeling, what's sometimes called affect. Some of you might know Ruskin's famous essay on the pathetic fallacy, which talks about this and makes some quite bold normative claims about what it means for literature. We sometimes think of affects as these kind of intensely private, individual, internal things, but affects are also relational structures that are out there in the world. They exist outside of us, and they define the relationships that it is possible to have and the kinds of individual subject that it is possible to be. And of course, the weather influences our emotional state. So could we also say that our emotional state influences the weather, or at least in the marginal cases, such as the difference between hail and sleet, that our mood can shape how we perceive, experience, and describe the weather? Okay. Well, given that when we talk about the weather, we're also performing and influencing mood, we're modulating emotion, why might it matter then that this speaker insists on snow and rain and not hail, and certainly not sleet? Could it be that this isn't just a meteorological claim? It's a claim about the kind of moods and relationship that it is now possible to occupy at this moment captured by this poem. So, why is this speaker trotting? Why didn't they stop to read the newspaper? Why are they in such a hurry? Why is the traffic so important and the weather so important? Why is there such an emphasis on this kind of environment of exciting chaos with the traffic acting exactly like the sky? Could it be because they're late? So I think we have some really good circumstantial evidence that they are late. They are late to meet the you in this poem. So in the next video, I think, let's go with that and see where it takes us. And I'll leave you with just a question. Do you think this is the first time that the speaker has been late? The first time that they've been late even to meet this particular person? Or do you think they're presenting themselves as someone who is seldom late, but by unforeseeable circumstances has been held up just this once? So let's take a little break, end this video there, and in the next one, we can explore what Lana Turner and lateness have to do with each other. Okay, thank you.